What if everything we've been told about autoimmunity is wrong? I'm Elizabeth Yarnell. After awakening partially blind one morning in 1999, a doctor told me my multiple sclerosis would put me in a wheelchair within 10 years. I refused to accept that as the end of the story, so I started investigating. Welcome to the Inflammation Investigator, the podcast that uncovers the inflammation lurking underneath your ailments. Because autoimmune and chronic conditions should not be viewed as death knells when they are actually alarm bells. I'm a traditional naturopath and founder of the Inflammation Academy. And in 2 episodes every week, we dig into what conventional medicine might be missing. If you're living with chronic or unexplained symptoms, this investigation is for you. Your body has been trying to tell you something. Let's start listening. Hi, and welcome back to the Inflammation Investigator. Today, we're going to be talking about intermittent fasting. And you might be wondering, what does intermittent fasting have to do with inflammation? Well, you may have heard me talk about that obesity is now considered excessive inflammation. And so intermittent fasting is an amazing tool. And maybe you've heard about it, but maybe you don't really know what it's all about. And maybe you've even tried it, but you've kind of like flubbed your way through. Today, I'm really talking to the expert on intermittent fasting, a personal friend of mine. Her name is Gin Stephens. So let me tell you a little bit about Gin before we go in and I introduce you to her. Gin Stephens is the author of the New York Times and USA Today bestseller, Fast, Feast, Repeat. She has a new program called Eat Like a Grown Up that is available through her Fast Feast. This is a tongue twister.
It's definitely a tongue twister.
Fast Feast Repeat mobile app. And that's available at app.fastfeastrepeat.com and through the iOS or Android app stores. She also wrote 28-Day Fast, Start Day by Day, and Delay, Don't Deny, Living an Intermittent Fasting Lifestyle. Both Amazon #1 bestsellers in the weight loss category, as well as Cleanish, Eat Mostly Clean, Live Mainly Clean, and Unlock Your Body's Natural Ability to Self-Clean. Another Amazon #1 bestseller in several categories. Gin has lived the intermittent fasting lifestyle since 2014, losing over 80 pounds. She's the host of 2 top-ranked podcasts, Intermittent Fasting Stories and the Fast Feast Repeat Intermittent Fasting for Life podcast with co-host Sherry Bullock. You can join her private community by going to ginstephens.com community. And now I'm so excited to introduce you to my good friend, Gin Stephens. Welcome to the pod.
Well, thank you. It is exciting to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited. I love your story. I love your books. I love everything that you talk about. So this is going to be a great conversation. Let's start off by telling us, how did you get here? What is your story?
Well, you mentioned already through my bio that I lost 80 pounds with intermittent fasting, and I started intermittent fasting in 2014. And my story is so similar to probably many, many of your listeners. I was an elementary school teacher. I taught for 28 years before retiring to work on what I'm doing now full time in 2018. But in all the years prior to intermittent fasting, I was a yo-yo dieter. I was always looking for something that was sustainable, something that would, get me to my goal weight and keep me there. But, when you're dieting, it's only as good as how long you do it, right? So you try the diet, you do it as long as you can, you finally can't do it anymore because it's not sustainable, and then the weight comes back. I mean, you name it. Anything that came out prior to 2014, I tried it at one point, except for Weight Watchers. I never did Weight Watchers, but everything else, I tried it. And, you would lose some weight and then you would regain it plus more. And so I actually first heard about intermittent fasting in probably 2009, but there wasn't a lot really known about it other than people were saying the prevailing thought was it was just a way to eat fewer calories, make it
Hmm.
easier to eat less. Now we know it does so much more than that. Thank goodness, which is why it's a healthy lifestyle, even if you don't need to lose weight, honestly. I call it the health plan with the side effect of weight loss, but we didn't know any of that back then. So I dabbled in it. I didn't really know what I was doing. But finally, in 2014, I went on a 7-day cruise with my family, and I hadn't been weighing. I'm not really sure how long I hadn't been weighing, but the scale had been up on a shelf because I just didn't want to see it. I'd really given up. But I got off that cruise ship. I saw some pictures of myself, the fancy formal night with the family, and I'm like,
Uh-huh.
who is that? It was me. And I felt like I'd been like inflated by a balloon, by a balloon. I just felt it just didn't feel like me at all. Getting around was hard, walking around, climbing the stairs. And so I was like, I've really got to do something. And so I pulled that scale down. I got on the scale and I weighed 210 pounds. I'd never seen a two before because, again, I hadn't been weighing. So I don't know
Uh-huh.
what it ever got to, but 210 was the biggest number I ever saw. And I was like, okay, this is it. Yeah, I've got to do something about it. So I found my way back to intermittent fasting for good. And again, didn't really know much about it because there weren't very many books about it. The people who
Hmm.
were talking about it were just talking about you're going to be able to eat less because you're eating either, there was an alternate daily fasting approach you could do. There were, eating window approaches, but whatever you were doing, it was just oh, you're just going to be able to eat less because you're not
Uh-huh.
eating all the time. So I white knuckled my way through it, but I did manage to lose the weight because I didn't quit. So that was really good. So I initially lost 75 pounds, which was my goal, and then went on to initially lose a little more and end up down 80 pounds. But I know so much more about it now, including the power of the clean fast, which I'll definitely talk about because that makes it so much easier to fast. And so I lost the weight and started telling people about it. Honestly, that's how I got to where I am now. As a teacher, I've always wanted to share things with other people, whether it was my
Hmm.
students in the classroom or now, once I had discovered how to make intermittent fasting work for me, I just wanted to tell everybody. So that's how I got started.
Wow, it's so hard for me to even picture you 80 pounds heavier because you're not a tall person. How tall are you?
I'm 5'5", yeah. And I'm small boned, I don't have, and so it's,
Right?
it's hard for me to even remember being that person. I look at pictures of myself over the years and I was up and I was down, I was up and I was down. And then, since 2014, well, 2015, really, when I lost the weight, I've just looked the same except for getting older.
Well, that happens to us all.
Well,
There's
it
only so
does.
much you can do about that,
That's
right?
true. That's true.
Okay, so well, let's start off. What is intermittent fasting? Let's just act like we're talking to people who've never tried it and don't really know what it even means. What does that mean, intermittent fasting?
Well, it sounds a little scary if you look at the word fasting. We think about
Hmm.
fasting, and so many people have experience with certain types of fasting with religious practices that they've done. Every
Mm.
major religion talks about fasting in their
Hmm.
their books and their practices. So fasting, you might only think, well, I know Jesus did that for 40 days and 40 nights. You may have heard a friend who did some fasting, but intermittent fasting, if you think of it through, the scientific terminology, time restricted eating is really one way of looking at it. That sounds a little less restrictive. Just time restricted eating. We're going to eat within a period of time and we're going to be intentional about that. And we're going to understand why we're doing it. One of the reasons to be an intermittent faster is to regain the metabolic flexibility that we lost over the years. I believe we're born with metabolic flexibility. If we think back to why people would need to be metabolically flexible, we can go back to way before the modern times when there weren't grocery stores and you just couldn't count on your next meal. You had to
Mm.
hunt, you had to fish, you had to gather, you had to grow what you were going to eat. And
Hmm.
so people had to be able to have energy when they were looking for food and times were tough. If we, got hangry and weak and couldn't function without a meal, the human species would have died out. And so we know we haven't. So being metabolically flexible means our bodies are great at running on whatever fuel source is available. When we're eating, we're in the fed state. Our body can use what we're eating as fuel, obviously. We all know that. But most of us are going through life with lots and lots of stored fuel. Even if you're at a healthy weight, you've got lots of stored fuel. You've got stored glycogen in your liver, on your muscles, or in your muscles. You've got lots and lots of fat. Even lean people have stores of body fat that are there for us for times that our bodies need to dip into that. So we are supposed to be able to shift fuel sources easily. But along the way, with modern life, we don't do that anymore. Most people, it starts in childhood. And of course, kids are growing and need to eat more frequently than adults that are already growing, but we have snack time all the time and we don't stop having those habits when we're adults as well. We eat first thing in the morning, we have a snack, we have lunch, we have a snack, we have a latte, we have a dinner, we have a snack. So we never give our bodies time to need to tap into stored fuel. And our body loses that metabolic flexibility as time goes on. You hear people, like I said, talking about being hangry or, well, if I don't eat, I get shaky, or if I don't eat, I get a
Mm-hmm.
headache. And that is all really legitimate because their bodies don't know how to be metabolically flexible. But that's why it's so important to understand we can get back there and we can teach our bodies to do that again. And that is really why I wrote 28-day fast start day by day. Oh, hold on, it's this one right here, because it's a program really designed to help people know what to expect through the challenging beginning parts. The beginning part is the hardest part, which is why I dabbled in it for all those years, 2009 to 2014. I would do it for a couple days or maybe for a week, and then the weekend would happen. And I'd be like, well, it's the weekend. I'm just not going to do it. I'll start again on Monday. And I
Uh-huh.
never got metabolically flexible. I never got to the easy part. I was living in the hard part every single day. So when you understand that you need to give your body time to adapt and to learn how to tap into stored fuel, intermittent fasting, first of all, it makes a lot more sense. And also, you understand why, if you dabbled in it or tried it for a little bit, it was really, really hard because it is hard if you've not ever done it before. If you've been, relying on that blood sugar roller coaster that most people are doing, it takes some time to teach your body to do that, to do something else. So if you're just going to think about it as you're going to eat within a period of time that's intentional, and the rest
Uh-huh.
of the time you're going to fast clean, that's all you need to know. Well, that's
Okay,
not all you
so
need to know, but that'll get you started.
so let's back up a little bit.
Okay.
I want to talk about two things that you
Okay.
just said. So the period of time and then the cleanish fast.
The clean fast.
So
Yeah.
the clean fast. Which
Yeah.
should we start at? Should we talk about like the period of time
Whichever one.
first? Okay, well let's talk about the period of time. What do you mean by a period of time?
Your eating window. We call that your eating window, and you get to decide when that is. Most people who live the intermittent fasting lifestyle find that they're better at delaying when they start for the day versus you closing your window. I am one of those people. If I started eating first thing in the morning, like I typically have about a 5 hour eating window. That works really well for me and my lifestyle and how much I like to eat and the way that I like to eat. But where you put that period of time, whether it's 5 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours, depending on your goals, whatever that might be,
Hmm.
wherever I put that 5 hour window for me makes a whole lot of difference. If I got up in the morning and decided that was going to be my 5 hour window, and even if it was like 9 to 2, I would be hungry again before going to bed. I would
Right.
I would legitimately be hungry and I would have a hard time keeping my window closed. When I wake up in the morning, however, it's already been, a good number of hours since I ate the day before. So my body is really close to flipping that metabolic switch towards fat burning. And so maybe mid morning, I'll have a little wave of hunger. And then my body's like, whoop, okay, we know what to do. And I've flipped the metabolic switch. And then it's really easy for me to delay opening my window. And then I open it, keep an eye on what time it is, close it usually within about 5 hours, but it does vary. It can be a little longer, it could be a little shorter, depending on what I'm doing for the day.
So does that mean if you are doing intermittent fasting, you're unlikely to be able to join your family for meals?
Oh gosh, no, no. It all depends on, what your family is doing. Now, if you want to eat breakfast and lunch and dinner over a 12-hour period every day, you're correct. That is not going to be intermittent fasting. That's just a typical eating pattern. So you do
Uh-huh.
have to decide, what you prioritize. For me, I love the dinner meal. I enjoy, spending my day working. And what you'll find once your body is metabolically flexible and you've adapted and you're fasting clean, you do not have the dragginess, the hangriness, the blood sugar swings. You're not going through that. So you have mental clarity, you have sustained energy. As a writer, I do all of my writing in the fasted state because I'm sharper thinking. And again, if we think about biologically, while that would be true, people who needed to go hunt and gather and find a meal, if they were sluggish and couldn't really be active, they would have died out. They wouldn't have had success. So
Hmm.
our bodies have great stamina and endurance and energy and mental clarity once we flip the metabolic switch. So if I want to have that feeling and enjoy a nice dinner, then I know that I can delay when I open my eating window, and then maybe I start with my main meal, maybe I start with a hearty snack, maybe I eat another meal later. So I figure out when I want to eat for the day, and I shift my window around really to go with that. But for me, most of the time, it's going to be, I want that dinner meal is my favorite one. But we learn also that being with people at the table does not
Hmm.
mean we have to eat with them. I've got my podcast, Intermittent Fasting Stories. I've interviewed 500, I mean, are out 530 episodes are out as of
Oh
now,
my gosh.
something like that. And I've talked to people from all walks of life, all ages, all stages of people. And, sometimes I talk to mothers who are home with small children. And so you might find, well, how in the world are you going to feed small children breakfast and lunch, but you're not eating? And we figure out over time it's not a big deal. We can sit with our families while they're eating. We can sit with our kids while they're having their breakfast and drink our clean, fast beverages. And just because other people are eating, that doesn't mean that you have to or that you need to. The being
Right.
with them is really what's important.
That's so nice to have that permission, right?
Hmm.
Because we might have that expectation, and sometimes we need to hear somebody give us permission to do something or not to do something.
It's true. People worry about
Hmm.
that a lot. They're like, well, my friends like to go out for lunch and I don't like to eat lunch. When I eat a heavy meal now as an intermittent faster, if I eat a
Uh-huh.
heavy meal early in the day, I definitely can tell the difference and I feel more sluggish. I'm like, so it has to be really worth it to shift that window earlier. But, if your friends like to go out to lunch, but that's not the time you want to go, you have some options. You can say, I would love it if we could just push it a couple hours later. What would y'all think about
Uh-huh.
going at 2 instead of 11 or something? Or you could say, I'm just going to join you, but I'm going to drink black coffee or I'm going to just have, a hot tea or just some water. Or you could decide to shift your window that day. Maybe you're someone who does really, really well with a eating window that opens midday and then goes for 5 hours. Some people are able to close their window earlier and they're fine. There are people who have a morning window and that just works well for them. I just know myself. And even if I eat a giant meal early in the day, I'm going to be hungry later. And I don't sleep
Right.
well if I,
If you're
haven't
hungry.
really had, yeah. So for me, that's what works well for me. But I know you've heard the phrase, be, study of one before. I didn't invent
Right.
that phrase, but
N of one.
yeah, it really applies to intermittent fasting being a study of one. And the whole point of really all of my books is not me giving you a prescribed, here is exactly when you open your window, here's when you close it, here's the protocol for you. It's all about figuring out what works for you and suits your lifestyle. I'm more of a volume eater, but let's say we have someone who is a very restrained eater who likes to eat light meals. they might need to open at noon and have an 8 hour window because they just can't fit in enough food for the day within 5 hours. I do not have that problem. But again, it's a matter of understanding yourself and knowing what works for you. There are also a lot of people who mentally can't get around the idea. They're like, well, if I'm eating all the time now, I'm definitely never going to want to only eat within 5 hours. That sounds impossible. But a funny thing happens when they become fat adapted. They'll think, or they'll say, I thought an 8 hour window sounded like it was crazy, but now I'm having a 4 hour window every day, and that's what feels the best. So it's really you let your preconceived notions go and see what your body does, and it will probably surprise you.
So the 5 hour window, that's
Yep.
not like standard. Like everybody doesn't need to do a 5 hour window. Did you have to work up to a 5 hour window?
Oh, well, yeah, you definitely, that's, in the 28-day fast start day by day. And in my book, Fast Feast
Uh-huh.
Repeat, and even in Delay Don't Deny, I talk about, how you can ease into that. Because again, your body is not metabolically flexible on day one. Like I would not tell someone to start off, I've never fasted before. Now today I'm going to wait until 4 p.m. to open my window. You're not
Right.
going to feel good. That's a
Right.
lot. But you need to kind of work into it, ease into it, depending on, what works for you. Even the rip off the band-aid approach that I have is not quite, you're not going straight to that. And again, I also, just because a 5 hour window is what really works well for me over the years, that doesn't mean that's everyone's ideal goal. But I do want people to be very open minded about the fact that you just might surprise yourself. Because I've heard that over and over and over, from thousands of people. They're like, I thought, I would want to do an 8 hour window. And then I realized that I don't need 8 hours to nourish my body
Mm.
well and to be satisfied in my window. We
Hmm.
really don't need to eat as much or as often as society has taught us that we do.
Right. And intermittent fasting is not about calorie counting or
No.
even quantity of food, correct?
Well, there's a little nuance there. You
Okay.
can overeat in an eating window, and we do still have to find that balance. So, the thing about calories, this, there's a lot of flaws to calorie counting, right? Our
Yes.
bodies do not treat all calories identically. And,
Hmm.
100 calories of jelly beans and 100 calories of actual beans are going to be received very differently in the body.
Right,
you know,
right.
and so the goal is learning how to listen to your body and recognize when you've had enough because all animals and people are born with working hunger and satiety signals. But I find it to be really striking when we think about the modern obesity epidemic.
Hmm.
Who is struggling with obesity in the whole animal kingdom? Humans and the animals we feed. And that's it. Other animals are not struggling with obesity. Babies are born with working hunger and satiety signals. If you've ever fed a baby, you know what I'm talking about. When a baby has had enough, they're done.
They stop eating. Yeah.
They stop. They stop. And I had one of my sons. He would do something with his lips, and I was like, okay, he's finished. He's doesn't matter how much I had put in the bottle or had planned to feed him. That was all he was going to have. But when they were hungry, even if they had had it all, they want more, right?
Right.
So we are born with working hunger and satiety signals. The problem is the modern food system, of course, disconnects us from that. Ultra processed foods, we're not working in sync anymore because we're not giving our bodies the nutrients that they need. And again, being on that blood sugar roller coaster also makes it really hard because you eat ultra processed foods, your blood sugar goes, and then it goes, boom, and then you're hungry, and then you eat again. So it's really a vicious cycle. And we've gotten disconnected from those signals. But the clean fast plus nourishing your body well in your window really does get you back in touch with that. And you can feel when you've had enough when you're eating real food in an eating window. It's like, oh, I get it. Now, I talked to someone a few years ago from Australia who had been taking the weight loss medication back several years ago. I imagine it was
Hmm.
Ozempic, whatever it was that they had in Australia a few years ago, maybe 2023. Maybe I talked to her, and then it was hard to get. Suddenly, it was really hard to get, and she couldn't get it. And she's like, "Oh no, what am I going to do?" So, because it had really quieted the food noise in her brain, so she
Uh-huh.
I think maybe had a friend that told her about intermittent fasting. So she started fasting clean and eating in a window. And she found that intermittent fasting with the clean fast and eating in a window gave her the same freedom from food noise that the drugs had given her. So I think
Ah,
that it's really powerful, because right now we're maybe in a period of time where people feel like it's hopeless unless you take drugs. You're never going to be able to stop the food noise unless you rely on
hmm.
pharmaceuticals. But we can turn off that food noise with the clean fast and with nourishing our bodies well in an eating window that works for us. Because again, I was that yo-yoer. I was constantly having a snack or a latte or whatever, and I needed it. My brain needed that. And I had food noise all the time. And now here we are, it's 2:30. I just went to a farmer's market right before talking to you, walked around. They had lobster rolls there. I love lobster rolls. But I was like, oh,
Uh-huh.
my window's not open. So I didn't even consider eating. And I mean, could I? I could decide to open if I wanted to with a delicious lobster roll at 1:30 in the afternoon. I could
Uh-huh.
absolutely have chosen to do that if I decided that food was window worthy. But I wanted to be mentally sharp to talk to you and have that clarity rather than I just eating a lobster roll. And so there was no food noise. I didn't have to talk myself out of it. I mean, it's just such a change from how I lived prior to intermittent fasting. And it's not just me saying that, it's, the thousands of people who have lived the lifestyle over the years and read my books and done it for themselves. So you don't need to count calories when you're eating real food and listening to your body, and you've learned to reconnect with those signals. That being said, you absolutely could make choices that cause you to gain weight even in an eating window. If you're overriding satiety, if you're not nourishing your body the way it needs to be nourished, that sort of thing.
Right. If you're living on junk. I love
Exactly.
that. I love that phrase, window worthy. I'm going to
Yeah.
hold on to that one. But let's go back and let's talk about a clean fast versus a
Right.
dirty fast.
Right. Actually, I invented the term clean fast, and somewhere in 2017 is when I started using it. I wrote my first book in 2016, Delayed on Deny, and the terminology was not in there because we weren't using it yet. It's in the second edition, though. I revised it in 2024 and put that in there. But we were learning kind of together what worked and what didn't, because again,
Hmm.
we didn't know. What really got me on the right track though was reading Jason Fung's book The Obesity Code, where he talked about insulin and our weight, insulin and
Uh-huh.
obesity. Jason Fung is a nephrologist, he's a kidney doctor, and so his patients would come to him, and pretty much all of them were also type 2 diabetic or suffering with some sort of metabolic problem, which led to them having the kidney problems down the road. And so he figured out, he made the connection, which wasn't new. He's not the person who first made this connection, obviously, but he really made the connection between insulin and obesity. I mean, we knew that
Hmm.
already. Hyperinsulinemia is when we have too much insulin. And we know that insulin as a hormone is anti-lipolytic. That's just a fancy word. Anti is against. Lipolysis is fat burning. So when you have really high levels of insulin all the time, your body is in storage mode, storage mode, storage mode. And if you're in storage mode, but you're trying to lose fat, doesn't work very well. So,
Hmm.
understanding that link between chronic high levels of insulin and whether you're storing or you're able to, get into that stored fuel, that made a big difference for me. And so, in the obesity code, he talked about how sweet tastes like artificial flavor or artificial sweeteners. He talked about stevia in there specifically cause a greater insulin response than even table sugar. And that
Hmm.
was like a wake up call for me because at that time, again, we were thinking that all that mattered was calories in, calories out. And if you're drinking a 0 calorie stevia flavored or stevia sweetened soda, or if you're putting, 0 calorie whatever in your coffee or drinking flavored coffee, no big deal. But when I
Hmm.
learned about the insulin response, it's the cephalic phase insulin response. It happens in the brain. And I have links to the research on my website, also in my books. But basically, they found that just the taste of sweetness caused your brain to say, oh, we know what's happening. Sweetness is associated with sugar, glucose, something is coming in, energy is coming in. And if you think about the foods in nature that taste sweet, your body's going to need insulin to manage the blood sugar load that's coming in. That's
Hmm.
how our bodies are designed. And
Right.
it's beautiful when it works how it's designed to. But think about our modern time when people are, think about the beverages people are drinking all day. Everything is flavored, everything is sweetened, even if it's 0 calorie. You're putting something in your coffee. It's all the time flavor, flavor, flavor. And so your brain is getting the signal all the time. Your brain doesn't understand, vanilla coffee flavor. It's like, well, it's sweet. We're going to need some insulin. So our bodies are pumping out that insulin all the time.
Hmm.
So I realized we needed to keep our insulin low during the clean fast. So we have three fasting goals. Let me back up. One of them is to keep insulin low, and I just explained why. And we do that by not putting anything in our mouths that our brain will interpret as food,
Uh-huh.
sweetness, food flavors, that sort of thing. So what can we have that doesn't do all that? Plain water. Don't put lemon in it or cucumber or water enhancers. Just plain. Plain sparkling water, same thing. We don't want those flavors in there. And then black coffee and plain tea, not the flavored teas, not all those herbal teas like the sweet chamomile, all that. No, stick to actual tea from actual tea leaves because a bitter flavor profile does not cause you to have an insulin response. So the bitter flavor
Ah.
profile of the black coffee or the plain tea, those would be fine. Green tea, any kind of tea that you like. And that's really it. So fasting goal one, keep insulin low. Fasting goal two is we want to tap into stored fat for fuel or stored energy of whatever type. Oh, did you have a question?
Wait, yeah, before we get there, so you're saying that during your non-eating
Fast.
window,
You're
during
fast.
your
Mhm.
fast time, you can drink as much water, black coffee, and unsweetened tea, real tea, as you
Yep.
want.
And
Okay.
unflavored sparkling water. Exactly. I've got my black coffee right here. Mm.
So when we're calling it a fast, it doesn't mean like you can't have any liquid fast. You
No,
can.
no, we are not dry fasting. That
But
is part of the Ramadan tradition, but as
right.
intermittent fasters, we're not dry fasting. We're also not trying to overdo the liquids because when we're fasting, we don't need as much fluid intake as if you're eating because a lot of fluid is used in digestion.
Hmm.
So we can actually drink too much water in the fasted state and you're kind of like washing out your electrolytes if you think about it like
Right.
that, and that can
Right.
cause problems. So I just drink when I'm thirsty during the fast, and when there comes a point where I'm like, well, I've had enough coffee, and then I'll switch over to water or to sparkling water until it's time to eat. So that keeps your insulin low during the fast, which is what we
Thank
want.
you for clarifying that because,
Yeah,
fasting, as you were saying, could mean absolutely nothing crossing your mouth. I
right.
also thought we should highlight that this means no chewing gum during
It's
your
true. We
fast.
don't want to put anything like that sweetened in our mouth. Now, you can brush your teeth. People sometimes worry, wait a minute, what about that? Well, when you brush your teeth, there may be a slight insulin response, but it's just a blip and it goes right back down. Versus if you're having a latte or if you're having a diet soda, you're not just taking one sip and you're done. People, that goes on and on and on. So
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a matter of the duration. And also, good dental hygiene is important. So yes, please
Yes.
brush your teeth,
Yes.
but no gum. And look, I know for people who chew a lot of gum, that might be hard to hear. I was the person I had when I was a teacher. I would buy this cinnamon gum from Amazon that was like xylitol sweetened by the 600 piece
Oh,
canister.
gosh.
I was popping that gum nonstop. And I can't think of the last time I chewed gum. I don't have breath mints. I just, if you feel like your breath's a little funky, swish some water around, brush your tongue with water. That helps.
Oh, that's a good tip.
Yeah.
Okay. So, number two.
Fasting goal two is we want to tap into stored fuel, stored fat for fuel, ideally, if people have some weight to lose, which is one reason a lot of people start. But if we want to tap into the stored fat, obviously insulin has to be low, but we also don't want to be taking in another source of fuel, which is why You don't want to put, the butter or the MCT oil or the coconut oil in your coffee.
Mm.
That became popular. It's been a while now. It's been a good while since that first took off. And you will absolutely get energy from that stuff in your coffee. But do you want to burn fat from your coffee cup or do you want to burn fat from your body? You get to
Ah,
decide. And for most of
interesting.
us, it's going to be our bodies instead.
Uh-huh.
So
Right.
fat is not free.
Well said. Well said. Okay.
And then the third fasting goal is we want to have increased autophagy. And autophagy is something that I had certainly never heard of until 2016. And in 2016, the Nobel Prize for Medicine was awarded to a researcher who was studying autophagy, which is our body's, if you can think about it as our cellular housekeeping, house cleaning, recycling, upcycling system. And it's not something that's on off. It's more like a dimmer switch.
Hmm.
And as time goes on, most adults experience decreased autophagy as we get older. That's one thing that's believed to help lead to increased aging, for example. We're not giving our bodies time to clean anything up. But when we fast clean, our bodies turn up the autophagy, turn up the house cleaning. And so, what would stop autophagy? Well, eating, protein specifically turns down autophagy. And so we don't want to have anything that's going to have protein in it, like a bone broth or whatever it might
Mm.
be, or a pre-workout that's going to be protein. The good news
Or
about all
even
that is
cream in your coffee, right?
we don't want to do all that. You don't want to have collagen in your coffee or any of that. Save
Hmm.
all that for your eating window. Sometimes people have the mistaken idea that you must have protein right before or right after a workout, but really it's more of what your body has taken in over the 24-hour period. So your eating window is perfectly fine. That time is sufficient. You do not have to have something. And usually the people who are telling you you do have to have something are also trying to
Hmm.
sell it to you. So
Right.
I promise you, if there was something that I could sell to you, and make a lot of money, I would do it. You don't need any of that. You don't need anything special during your fast. You want to fast clean. You want to have increased autophagy. Again, it goes back to the same things: plain water, plain sparkling water, tea, black coffee. And actually, black coffee increases autophagy. So that works really, really well with our fasting goals of keeping insulin low, tapping into stored fat for fuel or other stored fuel sources like glycogen in your liver, and then having increased autophagy. When you understand all those things going on in the background, you would not want to mess with the clean fast because if you're taking the time to do it, you want to give your body time to get all the benefits that it can. I know that your focus is inflammation.
Hmm.
Well, guess what is linked to high inflammation? High levels of insulin. Hyperinsulinemia, having high levels of insulin, goes right along with increased inflammation. And of course, food choices make a big difference with that too. But even before I naturally started making better food choices as time went on, my seasonal allergies completely went away as an intermittent faster.
Ah,
And that's, of course, related to high levels of inflammation as well.
right.
So, I mean,
Right.
I don't take allergy medicine anymore. I go through allergy season and I don't need to take anything, which is remarkable because I was the person who was on, I took something that's the spray one all year long. I had to take an oral, whatever it was. And then during real peak allergy season, I layered Benadryl on top of that. And now,
Oh,
no more. So,
that is a great testimonial. So I'm still confused. What is a dirty fast?
well, I don't believe the dirty fast exists. When you
Oh,
understand what fasting is, you're either fasting
uh-huh.
or you aren't. Like if you went in
Okay.
for blood work and your doctor said you had to have fasted blood work and you said, "Oh, I just dirty fasted. I just had some creamer." But he would say, "That's not fasting. You're going to have to come back
Uh-huh.
tomorrow." Or if you went for surgery and you were supposed to be fasted and you said, "Well, I just dirty fasted. I had some cream. I put some butter in my," they would be like, "No." So you're either fasting or you aren't. And so
Ah.
I really hate the phrase dirty fast because it implies that that's an option. You're like, well, if there's a clean fast, there must be a dirty fast. No, you're either fasting clean or you're not actually fasting. So that's something to keep in mind.
That's so good to know.
Yeah.
Um, I guess I never thought that coffee would be acceptable on a fast. So that's
Yeah.
also good to know because that's can be so comforting and feel like you're filling and eating something or putting something in your stomach
It's true. And when we
just to have black
understand
coffee.
that the coffee doesn't interfere with our fasting goals, it's not going to cause the insulin response. It's not going
Uh-huh.
to keep you from tapping into stored fat for fuel or for, you know, actually black coffee is fantastic at clearing out liver glycogen, which is one thing we want. We want that to happen.
Hmm.
So the coffee
Hmm.
supports that goal, and the coffee also supports increased autophagy. So the three fasting goals are not compromised by the black coffee. Now, if you don't like coffee, you don't have to have it. You don't need coffee to
Right.
fast, but it's an option if you like it. And when you realize that like I said, it supports all three of those goals. There's so many studies on coffee and increased fat burning and longevity even. And so there's lots of reasons to include coffee if you want to.
That's so good to know
Yeah.
because it's nice to know what you have. I always think of that scene in A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. I assume you've read that book. Um,
Not.
oh my gosh, it's a classic right from between the wars, I think.
Okay.
But so it's about a young girl growing up early on in the Depression in New York City, and they don't have any money for anything. She lives with her mother and her brother, and but her mother prepares a pot of black coffee and on the stove every day, and she's allowed to have for every meal, she's allowed to have a big cup of black coffee, and if she doesn't want it, she's allowed to pour it down the drain. It's like the one thing that the one luxury she has,
Yeah.
right?
Right,
So,
right. And I do. I love black coffee and I've turned into quite a coffee snob. I love my black coffee, but when I first read the obesity code and learned about the cephalic phase insulin response, I had been using, vanilla cream stevia in my coffee and also cinnamon, and it was delicious. And I'm like, okay, I see
ah,
why that might not have been the best thing. So I was like, well, I'm just going to have to just not drink coffee at all because there's no way I can drink black coffee. I can't. So I just like, all right, done. Not going to drink coffee. Well, then I realized I really like the ritual of having a mug of hot coffee. And if you love the smell of coffee, you can learn to love the taste of black coffee. So I said, well, okay, I'd missed the coffee, so I added it back in black. And like within a week or so, my taste buds had adapted. Our taste buds turn over. You're going to have different taste buds. They can adapt. If you don't like the smell of coffee, then you probably won't like the taste either. But if you like the smell of coffee, you can learn to like the taste of black coffee.
yes. And the ritual itself is
Yeah,
huge, right?
it is.
That's so much. And that's when people try to give up coffee completely. That is, I think, the hardest part for them besides the caffeine addiction.
Yes. Yeah. And a
And
mug of hot water is also really soothing for someone who just really, if you truly don't like coffee or you don't want the caffeine for whatever reason, hot water in a mug. We've named it MT in our community. Someone came up with that EMTEA, like empty. We call it MT.
tea
And
without the tea.
exactly, it's MT. But it really does hit the spot, especially in the winter. Like I don't drink it during the summer. I do drink my coffee hot in the summer, but in the winter, I'll pull out a mug of hot water and instead of cold water or sparkling water, and it's soothing and it's really enjoyable.
Let's talk a little bit about your community because I
Okay,
know you have a very large and active community. Can you tell
I
us a
do.
little bit about that?
I can, and it started by accident. I started again, like I said, I learned about intermittent fasting over the years, and then I started doing it, and I started telling people about it, and then
Uh-huh.
this is way back in 2014, 2015. I was in a bunch of Facebook groups. And the more I learned, the more I was like, well, I wanted to give people different advice, but I was in other groups, and you got to be cautious when you're in someone's group. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to start my own group just for me and
Hmm.
my friends. And we can talk about, what we're learning and about fasting and how to make it work for us. And so I did. I started that in August of 2015. And it was like me, and then there were like 30 of us in there. And then it just kept growing and growing. And it was funny. I had no intention of writing a book or doing anything like that. But our podcasting, but people kept asking questions. And so we had a pinned post that kept getting long. I'd say,
Uh-huh.
read the pinned post. It would get longer and longer and longer. And I'm like, and people would say, what book should I read? And I'm like, well, here's a book, but ignore what they say about diet soda. You don't want diet soda. Or this book, but don't.
Right.
And I'm like, so I just am going to write a book, a short book. And that's when I wrote my first book, Delay Don't Deny, in 2016, because I just wanted people to have the information. Like, read this one.
Uh-huh.
Start here. And so my Facebook groups just started growing and growing and growing. And by the time I left Facebook in 2021, we had 500,000 members combined
Wow.
in my groups. And like we were having over 1 million post comments and reactions every month. I mean, it was crazy. It was just too much to keep up with. So at that time, I mean, you remember 2021, it was a
Hmm.
tough time in general. And Facebook was really cracking down on what it considered to be, health advice. And people
Right.
were having groups disappear. Like they would just
Right.
disappear overnight. And that's like, well, I'm just going to go off of Facebook. So I went off of Facebook and I've been off Facebook ever since 2021. We're on the Circle community and it's just fantastic. And so you can get to that by going to jenstephens.com/community. Jen is Gin, Stephens is with a PH. So, we're there. I'm there every day. And, we have new members starting the 28-day fast start daily. But we also have people there, like just before I sat down here with you today, someone was celebrating their 3-year fast anniversary. So,
Wow.
and we have people that have been doing it obviously a lot longer than 3 years in there too. But we have the mix of brand new people, people who are experienced, people who dabbled in it, people who left, people who came back. I mean, it's everybody. So if you're someone, listening right now or watching right now and you've dabbled in intermittent fasting and it was a real challenge for you, I would predict one, you didn't give it enough time to become fat adapted. Two, you weren't fasting clean. That made it unnecessarily difficult. Because as soon as I started fasting clean, that struggle was over. I no longer was watching the clock or struggling or feeling awful. Or then three, you may have had unrealistic expectations about the speed of weight loss. I tell people not to expect any weight loss during the first 28 days. Don't even get on the scale. Get on the scale on day 0 and then put your scale away for 28 days, then get back on day 29 because now your body's had time to become fat adapted, hopefully. And you're also now going to see what your trend is doing. So I'm a big believer in weighing daily and calculating your weekly average, looking at your trend instead of the fluctuations. And sometimes people think, if you look at the tabloids on the checkout counter of the grocery store, like, lose what day are we recording this? The end of July, lose 50 pounds by Labor Day.
Oh
You're
my
not
gosh.
going to lose 50 pounds by Labor Day. Right? No, we lose fat slowly.
Uh-huh.
So any quick motion up or down on the scale is not fat gain, fat loss. It happens really, really slowly. So a realistic expectation is 1/2 to 1 pound per week. And so people who only, go on the scale every now and then, or they are not looking at the trend intentionally, the
Uh-huh.
fluctuations convince them nothing's happening. But when I started in 2014, that was the first time I'd ever weighed daily with weekly averaging. I got that from a diet book that I read. It might have been the Carbohydrate Addicts diet. I can't remember. But some diet suggested that you do that. And so when I started intermittent fasting in 2014, that's what I did. And finally, I could see that downward trend. I calculated my weekly average every Friday. And there would be a Friday where my Friday weight was higher than the Friday before, but my weekly average was down. So I'm like, okay, I'm moving in the right direction.
Uh-huh.
So that made such a difference. So giving
I
it
also,
time and having realistic
yeah.
expectations.
I also love the idea of this 28-day program because,
Yeah,
you can do anything for a month,
you
right?
can.
You can
Yeah,
do anything for a month, even if it's
yeah,
hard for like the first few days or whatever. It's just a month. And
yeah,
if by the end of the month you find you're still struggling or you don't want to do it, you don't have to.
yeah,
You're
yeah.
only
And
committed to
usually
yourself.
that's not what happens because I set up the book to have every day you've got a lesson in there about
Uh-huh.
whatever you need. Like here I am. One of them is about clean fast. One of them is all sorts of things, mindset. Also, there's lessons about everything. Why can't I sleep? Because when you're first adjusting, sometimes people have trouble sleeping. But there's also a daily inspiration spotlight, and it's a past intermittent fasting stories guest who shares what they've been up to since they were on the podcast. So you can read that and their advice and also listen to their episode if you want. And that just really brings it all together because,
Mm.
I don't believe, listener, I don't believe you're the one person that can't find the intermittent fasting lifestyle that can work for them. You can find the one. We say tweak it till it's easy, and it's a matter of being your own study of one and figuring out what you need. And we start with the clean fast. We nail that first, and then people usually find that naturally they start thinking about what they're eating and they gravitate towards different food choices than perhaps they thought they would, simply because when you're eating in a window, you notice how foods make you feel. You notice what sits well and what doesn't. And so people usually start to crave better food. We're looking for nutrients because that's what our bodies really want. And your body's like, that wasn't it. And then you learn what it is. So that's another fun part of the process is figuring out what foods work for you. And part of the process is drowning out the noise from other people who tell you what you're supposed to eat and instead figuring out what works for you. Because we're not all the same. I'm a big believer in bio-individuality. And,
Hmm.
whether you're lactase persistent or not, determines whether dairy works for you. There's so many things at play when it comes to what works for you.
Right, right. I'm so glad that we spoke about this because you are the expert on intermittent fasting. There is like no one else that is quite the expert like you are. And I think this has just been so interesting. And you've dispelled so many myths that I thought were true about intermittent fasting that are not true.
And I've
So,
got a couple more if you give me a minute. Can I
oh,
share those?
yes, please do. Please do.
Right now, there's a big voice out there on lots of podcasts talking about women and fasting, and especially as we get older, and cautioning against fasting. And I would encourage people to try it for yourself and be your own study of one and ignore the naysayers. Because if you're fasting clean and you're nourishing your body well and you are, moving your body, you can build muscle as an intermittent faster.
Hmm.
In fact, one of the early intermittent fasting books was written by a bodybuilder. And he did intermittent fasting as a bodybuilder and was like super strong as a bodybuilder.
Ah,
And so women are getting really confused by that conflicting message, like that it's not good for women or it's not safe for women or it's bad for our hormones. And that is not true. What's bad for women's hormones is over restriction,
hmm.
over dieting, over exercising. None of those things are good for us. Dr. Tabitha Barber. She's a good friend
Yes,
of
yes.
mine. She's taught me a lot about hormones. I've interviewed her a few times. She's a fasting expert and a hormone expert as well. She's a doctor. And women who are, like, for example, training for the Olympics often lose their periods
Right.
because of their nutrition program and their exercise. That's the sign that their bodies are having a little struggle.
Uh-huh.
But if we're still able to have a cycle, obviously not on the other side of menopause, I'm on the other side of menopause now, but
Me too.
yeah, as long as what we're doing is not overly restrictive, our bodies are going to be just fine. It's the over restricting. Like, my book is not called Fast, Eat a Little Diet Meal, Repeat. That word feast is in there on purpose because nourishing our body well is very, very important. So what we don't want to do is fast, overly restrict, repeat. That's not the goal. But as you get back in tune with your hunger and satiety signals, you know that you need to eat. You feel that signal when your window is open and you nourish your body well. So, I've never once heard someone say, these new diet drugs are bad for a woman's hormones.
Right.
Suddenly it's fasting is bad for women's hormones. And someone could, I want to be clear, someone could do intermittent fasting in a way that was not good for them if they
Uh-huh.
over fasted and then over restricted. And also, especially if they're coupling it with like really intense exercise and they're not feeling well. But if
Hmm.
you are fasting clean, your body's able to get into that stored fuel. So you are fueled well from your stored fuel, even if you're doing intense exercise. And then when you open your window, you're nourishing your body well, you're not going to have that problem. So I think it all comes from a well-meaning place, some of this conflicting advice. And it would not surprise me if there's one person in particular who talks a lot about intermittent fasting in a negative way. I would not be surprised if she didn't run across a lot of women in her day-to-day work as a nutrition trainer and a trainer, bodybuilder
Hmm.
kind of trainer, who were not fasting clean and who were probably also over restricting and overdoing. And so if you were in that sort of a world and people were overdoing it, then probably I could see why you might not think fasting was a good thing. But when we do it the way that I'm describing with the clean fast, nourishing your body well, and we don't have people who are having muscle loss or inability to build muscle. Your body is not going to burn muscle for fuel unless it can't get to the fat.
Mm.
Now, if you're not fasting clean, then okay, your body's going to have a harder time because remember I said that insulin is anti-lipolytic. So
Right.
it would not surprise me if she worked with a lot of people who were not fasting clean. I would expect muscle loss in that situation. But if you're fasting clean, your insulin is down, why would your body have fat on it and choose to burn muscle? It wouldn't. If
Right.
it can get to the fat, it's going to choose the fat. And so keeping your insulin down is that missing piece.
Excellent myth busting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any others you want to share with us?
Well,
Well,
that's really the main thing. That's the main one. And
okay.
that's, there are periods of time when it ramps up, more so than others. But it really, it breaks my heart that women who need intermittent fasting are being convinced that it's somehow going to be dangerous. But yet on the
Hmm.
other hand, there are other voices out there, not the same person, but other people saying, well, you can't lose weight and you're just going to need to take drugs. And that's your option. And so, there's not either or, right? There's a
Hmm.
part in the middle where you're fast and clean, you're letting your body use that stored fuel, you're getting your insulin down, and and you're finding the balance that just makes. I mean, I feel so good. I just turned 57, and I feel better than I did in my 30s. I'm strong and capable, and I
And
certainly
I'm
have
gonna
not
say
lost my muscle.
glowing.
I would just be if intermittent fasting just ate up all your muscles and you just were just going to store fat, I would be just like a sack of skin and fat.
Right.
And I
Right.
am not.
You are the walking billboard for
Well,
intermittent
it's true.
fasting.
That's the being your own study of one, right?
Right.
If someone is fasting clean, feeling good, once you get past that adjustment phase, you notice you feel better and better and better as time goes on. And, that's something that diets never did for us because, again, you did those diets, you felt worse and worse and worse till finally you just couldn't do it anymore. And that was your body fighting back. But with intermittent fasting, once you're adapted, it just becomes a way of life.
Right. Right. And I love that you really preach against these diet foods that
Right.
have so many chemicals and additives and preservatives in them, but that it's been drilled into us that, well, if you want to lose weight, lean cuisine is your
But
meal replacement, right? Or
no
a
thanks,
slim
I'll
fast
just
shake
fast
or
and let my body
something.
feast on something else that's,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Much rather have a lobster roll, I have to say.
Absolutely. Oh, and they had the best looking fruits and vegetables at this farmer's market. I got some beautiful tomatoes. Picked one up and sniffed it. The farmer was right there. And he's like, "You're a country girl, aren't you?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You smelled the tomato." I'm like, "Yeah,
Because they smell so much better when you don't get them at the grocery store.
it's true. It's true." They had some beautiful corn. I got a jalapeno. We got some fresh grown potatoes. So
Oh,
very
lovely. You're going to
excited.
have a feast tonight
I
for sure.
am. I am. Yeah.
Well, Jen, is there anything else that you'd like to make sure people understand about intermittent fasting and also let's review where people can find you and learn more about all of your books and your courses and stuff.
There's a phrase that I heard, and I did not invent it, but I love it. And the saying it goes like, um, diets are easy in contemplation, but hard in execution. Intermittent
Ah,
fasting is the opposite. It's hard in contemplation, but easy in execution, meaning we start that new diet and we're like, this is going to be great. And then it gets harder and harder and harder. Whereas intermittent
Uh-huh.
fasting, we think it sounds so hard, but then we're like, oh, it's actually not at all what I thought. I never ever maintained my weight as an adult ever until intermittent fasting. And so it's of course more than just that, not having the seasonal allergies, that sort
Right,
of thing. I don't
right,
even know what else is doing in my body. I just don't know because I don't have a life where I didn't do it. So I
right.
know, how healthy I am now, but I can only imagine, my dad was diagnosed as a type 2 diabetic at the age of 55 and he passed away at the age of 80 and he was just in really poor health because of all of those years of the type 2 diabetes they added up. And so I am 57, the same genes as my dad, and I am very healthy. And so if I had not found intermittent fasting, I do not doubt that I would be following in my father's footsteps. I would certainly be type 2 diabetic by now because I had all that abdominal obesity, all of
Right.
that.
And
I was
80
literally obese.
pounds. You were like it
Exactly.
was like a given. You were going to become a
I was
type 2
going to be.
diabetic.
I was going to have those problems. I would probably be taking a weight loss drug now because they're
Right.
around and out of desperation, I would have done it. And so, thank goodness I found a way that allowed me to work with my body instead of having to do something else. And again, the food noise is gone. And what looked good to me at the farmer's market, walked right by the cookies and the pie and the fudge. And I'm like, ooh, look at those tomatoes. And I could eat what I want in my window, but I wanted to eat those tomatoes. So it's just for
Right.
people who are listening, there's hope for that. So if you want to find me, you can go to ginstephens.com. Again, that's GIN, Stevens with a PH, and links to everything from there.
Fantastic. Jim, thank you so much for coming on the Inflammation Investigator today. I think this was a fantastic conversation and a topic that really people don't know, really understand
It's
enough
true.
about. So
It's
I think
true.
this was so informative and so enlightening for me too.
Oh, well,
And I
good.
really appreciate it. So thank
Well, thanks
you.
for having me.
Yes, have a great afternoon.
I will.
Okay. And that's another case filed on the Inflammation Investigator. Remember, every symptom is your body's way of communicating. We just need to learn the language. If today's episode sparked something for you, I want to hear about it. Share your own investigation discoveries with me on social media at Elizabeth Yarnell or find me at elizabethyarnell.com. Your experience could be exactly what another listener needs to hear. And make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. And here's the thing about investigations. They work best when you're not going it alone. If this podcast is helping you uncover the answers you've been searching for, please like, rate, subscribe, and review, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. As a new podcast, these actions mean more than you know. Want to dive deeper into your own inflammation investigation? Head over to inflammationinvestigator.com, where you can take my free inflammation quiz to uncover which hidden triggers might be affecting your health. Until next time, this is Elizabeth Yarnell, your inflammation investigator, reminding you that the solutions to your health issues are out there. Let's find them together.